So our first paper is Implications of Tablet Computing Enable Sharing and Annotation Technology on Introductory Accounting Student Performance.
Thank you very much, and thanks for everyone for coming to the last session for the conference. And I'd also like to thank the reviewer of this paper for the AFANS conference, which gave me a very thorough review, so that was really helpful. So basically what I'm looking at in this study is use of a tablet computer in our accounting age tutorials, one that looks something like this. And essentially what we did is we used it in our introductory accounting tutorials to take photos of students' homework and to actively annotate those in the tutorial, right? So to write on it using the annotation software within the tablet computer, both the instructor and the students could actually do that. So we only used one particular iPad, but we shared it around between the instructor and the students, and whatever was on the iPad or the tablet computer screen was duplicated on the central projector in the classroom, right? So it facilitated a more active approach where we could see and view what students had done for their homework. So the objective and motivation of this study is to basically analyse the implications of this technology on student performance in the final examination for the subject. So we looked at the scenario of a whole set of students that studied in introductory accounting tutorials and looked at whether or not the introduction of the tablet computer within accounting age tutorials actually facilitated an improvement in their final exam performance. Now, one of the key motivations for this initiative in this study is there's been calls for more student-centred learning approaches to actively engage students in the learning process and move away from the transmission modes of learning, right? So in the subject in which this particular innovation was applied, we have a traditional lecture and tutorial mode in which we run the subject. Lectures obviously where we go through all the core concepts, the examples, the different types of exercises that students may need to cover, and then the tutorial students are expected to complete their homework before coming and then actively participate and ask questions and basically tell the instructor what issues and exercises they would like to go through for the purpose of the tutorial. And so what we wanted to do is look at whether there's an approach to actively encourage them to make sure they come prepared and then participate and engage in class. Okay, so that was the motivation for this innovation and the study. One of the other motivations, as well as a contribution that we're aiming to make through this study, is there's a lack of clear evidence about what effects different technologies have on student learning and performance outcomes, right? So if you look at a lot of the literature within education generally, you see that there's a range of examples of innovations that have been applied. There's obviously study and surveys of students in terms of their opinions, their satisfaction with these technologies, which is of course important. But connecting it then with actual learning outcomes and their performance in the subject is very limited when you look at literature. And so that's one of the core things that we focus on in this particular paper to address that gap in our understanding. Okay, so as I mentioned, we ran this particular innovation in first year accounting age tutorials. So this is the very first accounting subject that students do at the university we ran this at. And the intention of the tutorial is basically students come in, have completed all their homework. We ask them at the start of the tutorial which particular questions they'd like to go through. We set up a plan about how to go about the lesson at the start of class. The instructor might also suggest, or probably will suggest, additional exercises which they feel are important that should be covered if students don't ask up front. And then we work through that plan throughout the class to basically focus on the issues that they're having and help them in their understanding of the different exercises and content. So the idea, the intention of introductory accounting tutorials is to have an active and a collaborative approach to learning involving the students participating, asking questions, answering questions, facilitated by the instructor. The reality though is there's large variation in homework completion. Okay, so this is a compulsory subject in which students might be majoring in accounting, they might be doing sports and leisure management degrees, and they will tell you right at the start of the semester, we don't want to do accounting, we'd rather not be here, but we have to be here because this is the last subject we need to do to finish our degree. All right, so you've got a wide spectrum of dedication and motivation levels. The issue is with that is there's also a large variation in the preparation that students actually do before they come to class. Right? So you get some students done everything, they tell you what issues and the exercises they'd like to go through, and other students that say nothing and don't really participate much in class. So what can happen is that if the tutor solely focuses on the distinct areas that some more participative, prepared students want to go through, a large set of students will be lost and won't know what's going on. Okay, and they'll be basically left out. So what can happen is the tutor starts to go through all the exercises in extensive detail and works through them on the board, and then students start to get disengaged and participate less, and they get the perception that the tutor will do this week to week, so homework declines throughout the semester, and so the problem gets worse. Okay, and so this is really a problem that we try to address through using this particular technology. So as I mentioned, we use tablet, what I call enabled sharing and annotation technologies, because we use the tablet, then we annotate using that tablet. And I'll go through which particular technologies that we used shortly. But just to give you an insight into the types of images that we could capture. So this is basically a capture of students' homework. All right, so something that they've done. So we basically what we tend to do when we use this technology is we don't go and stand over students and say, put your homework there, I'm going to take a photo of it. We ask them which ones, we ask the students who would like to volunteer and show us what you've done. So we don't use it as a way to, if you like, create fear and go, I better do it because the tutor's going to stand over me and take a photo of what I've done. We use it sort of on a voluntary basis. And so this student had a few questions about whether or not the accounts that they'd identified and the changes in those accounts, how they changed as a result of different transactions. And so we captured their responses for that exercise there. And then the instructor basically annotated this. Right, so that they drew on this and they identify which particular areas there appeared to be some gaps in their understanding or misunderstanding about the concept, and so they could focus on, for instance, we had a transaction paid rent in cash. The student wasn't sure whether it was cash or accounts, and so we could drill into that issue and clarify that issue at that early stage rather than just go through everything, which also, like for a lot of these exercises, students at the early stage might have had a clear understanding of, but there were distinct areas in which they didn't, and we could focus in on those particular problems. The common issue we see in introductory accounting is students tend to debit and credit retained earnings all the time for various reasons. And so straight away we can see here that they are indicating that that should be done there, which of course it shouldn't. And we can drill down on that particular issue and talk about what retained earnings is actually for at that early stage. Okay, so if we didn't take this capture, we might not have been aware, as say an instructor, that students were having these sort of misunderstandings about the nature of the content. We can of course take images of the textbook questions, which we frequently do when using this type of technology, for the simple reason that a lot of students don't bring the textbook to class. And so when you're trying to go through an exercise and go, well, as we referred, a lot of them either forgotten or they looked at it very briefly before class and they don't know what's going on if they don't have their textbook. So we can work through different exercises with them. Everyone can be on the same page, so it can help them engage and more actively participate in the class. All right, this is an illustration of management accounting related exercise in terms of cost of goods manufactured calculations and budgeting. And in this exercise, what we commonly have issues with is some students will go, well, I've got a different answer than the person beside me in terms of the final number as to what is the cost of goods manufactured. And what we can do is we can pull up someone's response and we can see what they wrote, and then find that they don't really have a clear understanding of what manufacturing overhead actually means, right? And so we can drill down, then we can talk about that issue, and we can go through that with them, rather than writing this whole thing out, which might be unnecessary, okay? And basically not using the time productively. So what we used in terms of this technology was, we used an Apple iPad for the purpose of the tablet computer, but of course you could use any tablet computer as the basis of using this technology. We used an app called Skitch, which was freely available. That can be used on iOS devices, Android devices, Windows devices. The good thing with this particular app is that it contains the camera application and the annotation options all in the same app. So you don't need to flip from camera application to annotation application when using it. So it's very, very fluid and quick and easy to use. It's got obviously the options to write on it directly like this, write on it in different colors, highlight different parts, erase things. It's also got the option where you can save the image, which we do. So we save everything that we've done. And so if a student goes, well, what about this particular concept? When you've normally rubbed it out or moved on, we can go back to that concept and go, well, as we explained here, this was the issue, this is what we just talked about, and we can then circle back, right? So it's more efficient as well from the purpose of reviewing things that we may have already covered in the tutorial that the student didn't pick up on straight away. To connect the iPad or the tablet computer to the screen, we used Apple TV module. The reason why we use this is because it contains its own Bluetooth network, which basically the tablet computer communicates with the Apple TV. So it's quite reliable from that perspective, but you can also use, for example, programs, or you can connect the Wi-Fi network of your computer to the tablet computer and get them to duplicate the image, which is then being beamed up on the central monitor in the classroom through that type of technology. We did use the Wi-Fi technology initially for the purpose of this particular innovation, but Wi-Fi obviously can be unreliable sometimes. It gets overloaded, so it can slow down. It also has to be password protected, because that means if you use Wi-Fi to stream your tablet computer to your laptop computer, students can access that and put other images up without you stopping them if it's not password locked. So the Apple TV module is a safer, more reliable source to connect the two devices. So in terms of the development around the expectations we expect this technology to have on student performance in the subject, the idea is to actively encourage them to come to class, do their homework before coming, which we found in the subject generally a lot of them did not do, which declined throughout the semester. So that was a key aspect. Another aspect was they're motivated to do it because they feel that the instructor will tailor the lesson to the issues they've had and can directly see what they've done. Okay, so there's a clear motivation and benefit associated with doing the homework rather than just doing it, turning up and looking at someone write out or show answers in front of the class. Prior studies have basically demonstrated students like to share their work with other students, with the instructor, to get the feedback on it, and it's positively related to their learning experience. So we feel the fact that the greater engagement in class, the greater motivation for them to actually do the homework, would indicate that using this would be positively associated with their performance at the end of the subject. The concern is, there's also been research that said that mobile devices can encourage shallow learning, right? Which basically means students look for information very quickly, try to look for the answers, you know, so like the McDonald's generation, some of them, they want everything straight away without really thinking about what they want. And so therefore they think less deeply about the different concepts we're covering. and so that potentially might be related to an understanding that's not as deep at the surface level. Okay, and so that is a concern. Now, on the balance of things, we tentatively propose, given this is an introductory, basic first-year accounting subject, we expect the use of this technology in the tutorials to be positively associated with their performance. Okay, so that's the initial expectation. Now, what we did analysis of the effectiveness of this technology through two different stages. The first stage, what we did is we had instructor observations about how they thought the technology worked comparatively to situations or previously without that technology. We also survey students through our online survey system, as well as surveys specifically directed to the use of this technology in the tutorial. Now, in terms of the observations from the instructor perspective, definitely a lot more class participation, a lot more students asking and answering and participating in discussions throughout the tutorial. There was no doubt about that. Much higher rates of constant homework completion throughout the semester, not just at the start, but constantly throughout the semester. And this particular innovation was used from start to end. Okay, so we didn't introduce it in, say, in week 3 or 4, it was introduced in week 1. We do have an optional an option in the subject that this is run where students can choose to allocate 10% of their assessment to submission of homework that they complete throughout the semester. So the instructor would collect that homework a number of times throughout the semester randomly and allocate the student a mark out of 10 at the end of the semester. Students can opt into that particular assessment, or they can put a greater weight on their mid-semester exam. So we found basically before introducing this technology, less than 50% of students would opt for that 10% class mark. After introducing, 75% opted in to that particular option. All right. There seemed to be more focus on the issues that students were having as a result of using this technology as well, so it's more tailored to the problems and issues they were having. So we got a whole lot of feedback, open-ended responses from students in terms of what they thought of the use of this technology in their tutorials, things related to interaction. They liked the fact that they could see what others had actually done. Some of them felt that they struggled with accounting and they felt maybe they're the only one in the class that doesn't really get this, and so it made them feel a lot more comfortable to then actively participate because they didn't feel I was the only one that didn't get this. There are a lot of others that don't get this too. So we found that participation tended to increase throughout the semester rather than decline, which was quite good. Some of them shared their thoughts on how they thought it was actually used by the instructor. So the point that I raised before, we didn't force students to take photos of their homework. We basically asked them, would you like to share it, okay? And associated with that, the instructor then didn't go, well, if you got something that's not quite right, well, this is not right, so why didn't you know this, etc. We would work through the concept with them, basically, rather than judging them and saying, you know, you should have prepared more thoroughly, because that would drive them away from engaging in the tutorial. Okay. Now, in terms of the key part of the paper, which is the implications of using the technology on performance, what we did is we ran two OLS regressions, or two sets of OLS regressions, to examine the implications of using the technology on their performance. To keep the conditions in which the tutorials were delivered and run consistent, we compared students pre-introduction of this and post-introduction with the same instructor. Okay, because the instructors obviously have some flexibility in how they deliver the classes, right? And so we didn't want to mix up other factors that might affect their performance. So we basically said, you know, instructor A, right, students that you've previously taught before using, after using, and that's what the dummy variable tablet use relates to. So it's a one where for the semesters that the instructor is using the tablet computer, and 0 for students prior to introducing that particular technology in their class. Okay. We also incorporate a whole lot of other control variables consistent with literature, as well as some unique to our study, like campus, because we had 2 campuses, and one of those campuses is where students are studying degrees that are less related to core business degrees, and they tend to have a very negative view of accounting. And so that might be related to lower performance in the subject. Now, in terms of the dependent variable, we had 2 dependent variables. These were both related or both based on final examination results. One particular area related to very procedural-based questions in which students calculated different ratios. So looked at financial statements, extracted the information from those statements and calculated the ratios and had basic interpretations of those ratios. So that was the first dependent variable. Second dependent variable was a theoretical based question in which students needed to read a very brief case. They needed to discuss the different accounting decisions made by that business, whether or not they're appropriate given generally accepted accounting principles, whether or not this business may be trying to engage in earnings management, whether there are alternative accounting choices that are appropriate. So they need a deeper understanding of the particular introductory accounting to do well in this question. Okay. Now, in terms of the results and what we find is, in terms of the more procedural-based questions, so calculating and interpreting ratios from financial statement information, what we can see is in the classes which the tablet computer was used, there's a positive and significant effect on student performance as a result of using this technology, which is significant at the 1% level. And we can also see the R-square is reasonably, I suppose it depends what research you look at, but it's 36%, which is not too bad. In terms of the theoretical based areas, the effect is negative. Okay, so students didn't do as well in the theoretical based question, right? So the question where they were required to illustrate, a deeper understanding of accounting decisions, potential earnings management, generally accepted accounting principles, performance decline, which from the perspective of using the technology is obviously a concern, but of course it's an important finding in this study. So in terms of the logic, why there seems to be this positive effect on procedural areas and negative effect on the theoretical areas, is the technology really allowed in tutorials to really drill down in those basic accounting concepts. The way that we captured the images and were able to annotate, journal entry recordings, constructing financial statements, basic management accounting questions. The technology really lent itself to a really good focus on that area and detailed discussions around the issues that students had. And so we were able to identify very clearly what they were having challenges with and address those for the purpose of the tutorial. The technology doesn't lend isn't so attuned to looking at detailed, extended responses, right? So you can take a photo of a page of writing, but it's going to be difficult to break it down and look at it thoroughly for the purpose of using this technology. And so in the tutorials, the idea, as I mentioned earlier, was to focus on the issues that students wanted to go through, and we felt that using this technology really encouraged them to focus on those questions that they thought they could get a more thorough and detailed analysis and feedback on based on what they attempted, and less so on the more theoretical questions. Thank you. For the purpose of the tutorial. So that's a point that really needs to be noted from the perspective of this study. We also did some sensitivity testing around this. So what we did is we felt that student performance in terms of the examination performance in the subject, more generally at university, and the assessment option that I discussed earlier might moderate the different associations within regressions that we ran, and what we found is the independent variable of interest tablet use dummy was fairly robust in terms of those findings, both for the procedural based question and theoretical question. So yes, the coefficient did vary, but it was fairly stable. All right, so these findings seem quite robust. Okay, so the conclusions, basically we can see much higher student engagement and participation as a result of using the technology. Certainly varying effects on performance, and that would suggest that yes, it is valuable for the purpose of reinforcing and identifying the issues that students are having and concentrating on those, but there is more appropriate options for more theoretical accounting decisions, choices based subjects than the use of this technology. So that's a key outcome of the study. In addition to that, given the different effects that we observe and what we see in literature, which in many cases is, we introduce this technology, and a lot of universities and higher education institutions are encouraging instructors and students to buy different technologies like tablet computers, like software, but there's really not a great deal of research around what effects it's having in terms of their performance. The findings we get from this study suggest that's quite problematic. We really need to know and analyse these things before we invest in them, and they have effects on students' performance going forward. Okay, so that's all I've got to say for now.
Thank you. Got a call to do the discuss it, and then we'll open up for questions.